In the quiet town of Milford, where their family had lived for generations, the girls, Isa and Eva, couldn't have been more different, despite the shared features that bound them by birth. To Eva, those differences had always been clear, long before life, as they knew it, began to change. As toddlers, they played in the family's large, sun-dappled garden, but Eva rarely felt like they were truly playing together. While Isla would dart across the lawn, chasing butterflies or climbing trees with reckless excitement, Eva found more comfort in the stillness, her fingers slowly tracing the edges of her storybooks as she nestled under the oak tree. She had always preferred the quiet to the whirlwind Isla seemed to create around her, feeling an almost instinctual need to keep her distance from the chaos her sister brought with her every step. When their mother called them in for tea, Eva would silently notice the state Isla returned in, her hair tangled with leaves and twigs, evidence of her wild adventures. Without a word, she would offer Isla a neat ribbon, a small attempt to impose some order, even if her sister never seemed to care about such things. As the years passed, the differences between them only became more pronounced, and Eva grew more aware of just how separate their worlds truly were. On their 6th birthday, their parents had gifted them matching bikes, bright red with white streamers fluttering from the handlebars. As Eva watched, Ila's eyes lit up with uncontained excitement. The moment she straddled her bike, it was as if the world around her had transformed into a playground of limitless possibilities. With barely a moment's hesitation, Isla pushed off with a burst of energy, her laughter ringing out like a triumphant melody. She sped down the street with wild abandon, the wind rushing past her face and tangling her hair. Each pedal seemed to propel her further into a state of exhilaration, and Eva could almost see the joy radiating from her sister in vivid waves. The bright red of Isla's bike became a blur against the backdrop of the quiet street, the white streamers trailing behind like a comet's tail. Eva, meanwhile, stood rooted to the spot, her own bike leaning against the fence, untouched. She watched Isla's carefree flight with a mixture of awe and apprehension. It was clear that Isla was lost in a world of pure thrill, her face flushed with the joy of speed and freedom. For a moment, Eva wished she could share in that feeling, but instead, she felt like a spectator in Isla's grand adventure. As Isla's laughter echoed down the street, it felt like a distant melody to Eva, who remained on the sidelines. She observed her sister's movements with a quiet, almost wistful admiration, realizing that Isla's exuberance was a world apart from her own more cautious, deliberate pace. Eva's hesitation was palpable as she approached her bike, the bright red and white streamers fluttering in the breeze. With a deep breath, she gripped the handlebars, her small fingers trembling slightly. The thrill Isla had embraced seemed foreign to her, and she felt a knot of uncertainty tightening in her chest. When she finally pushed off, her movements were tentative and wobbly. The bike felt unsteady beneath her, and each attempt to gain momentum was met with a fresh wave of apprehension. She caught glimpses of Isla racing ahead, her laughter a distant, joyous sound. To Eva, Isla's exuberance felt like a world apart from her own cautious efforts. The faster Isla went, the more Eva felt like she was lagging, struggling to find her balance in a sea of exhilaration she couldn't quite reach. Eventually, the joy of the ride proved too elusive for Eva. She pulled the bike to a stop and let it fall gently onto the grass. The thrill Isla had seemed to experience so effortlessly now felt like an unattainable fantasy. Eva retreated to the oak tree, her favorite refuge, where she took solace in her books. As she opened the pages and lost herself in the quiet comfort of her stories, she cast a wistful glance towards Isla, who remained oblivious to her sister's retreat. Ila's laughter faded into the background, a reminder of a world Eva felt she could never quite join. There was no singular event or dramatic confrontation that marked the beginning of their separation. Instead, it was a gradual drifting, a slow and unremarkable divergence in their paths. Eva felt it as a quiet but persistent shift, as though an invisible line had begun to draw itself between them. Each day they carved out their own distinct spaces, their lives running parallel but never truly intersecting. Isla's world was filled with vibrant activity and boundless enthusiasm, while Eva's was a realm of quiet contemplation and reserved engagement. They moved through the same house and attended the same events, but their interactions became more like distant echoes, rarely touching and never quite aligning. Eva noticed how their shared experiences seemed to dissolve into separate, unconnected fragments. They could be in the same room, but their conversations were fleeting, often overshadowed by their individual pursuits. Isla's laughter would ring out in one part of the house, while Eva found solace in the stillness of her own room, surrounded by books and silent reflections. To those around them, the reality of their relationship became increasingly apparent. The twin bond that was so often idealized and romanticized by others appeared to be delicate and tenuous. What was once presumed to be a deep and unbreakable connection had become a fragile thread, barely noticeable amidst the broader spectrum of their separate lives. It was clear that their bond, while real, had been worn thin by the unspoken divide that had settled between them. The sun was just starting to rise over Milford, painting the streets in warm golden hues. In their cozy bedroom, the soft morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. Isla stood by the window, her face bathed in the early sunlight. With her long dark hair neatly tied in a ponytail, she peered eagerly outside. She bounced slightly on her toes, her hands resting on the windowsill as she took in the view. The excitement in her eyes made the room seem brighter, and her quick movement stirred the light curtains, making them flutter softly. Meanwhile, Eva sat cross-legged on the bed, which was covered with a cheerful striped duvet. Her dark hair, loosely braided, fell over her shoulder in soft waves. She gazed out the window with a thoughtful expression, her eyes following the slow awakening of the town. Her fingers absent-mindedly twisted a strand of hair, her movements gentle and rhythmic. The room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of the duvet and the faint chirping of morning birds outside. As Eva watched the sleepy streets below, a serene smile touched her lips. The peaceful stillness around her was a stark contrast to Isla's lively energy, and the room seemed to hold a calm balance between their differing moods. Their mother's voice called from downstairs, slicing through the morning quiet. "Girls, it's time to head to school. We don't want to be late." Isla and Eva exchanged a brief glance, their faces lighting up with a mix of anticipation and morning grogginess. Isla sprang into action, her footsteps quick and lively as she bounded down the stairs, her enthusiasm making the wooden steps creak under her energy. Eva, on the other hand, rose from the bed with a calm grace. She moved down the stairs more slowly, her steps light and measured, her fingers brushing against the smooth railing. Her pace was deliberate, as if she was savoring each moment of the morning. The sounds of Isla's energetic footsteps echoed through the house, while Ava's soft, steady tread created a gentle contrast. Together, they made their way downstairs, each following their own rhythm as they prepared for the day ahead. If there was one thing that Isla and Eva shared, it was their love for Milford Academy. As they made their way to the kitchen, the thought of school brightened their steps, bridging the gap between their contrasting personalities. Isla, with her usual vigor, darted into the kitchen and grabbed her school bag, her excitement palpable as she recounted the upcoming day's adventures. "I heard we're doing a science experiment today," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Eva, following more slowly, allowed herself a smile at Isla's enthusiasm. She quietly reached for her own bag, gently placing it on the kitchen table. "I'm looking forward to the art class," she said softly, her voice a gentle counterpoint to Isla's exuberance. Their mother, bustling around the kitchen, paused to smile at her daughters. "I'm glad to see you both so excited for school. It's going to be a great day." The twins exchanged a look, a rare moment of shared understanding. Despite their different approaches to the world, their mutual love for Milford Academy was a common thread that wove through their lives. For that brief moment, it felt like their separate worlds could align in the shared joy of the school day ahead. What could possibly go wrong, they thought, that regular Monday morning when they arrived at school? But that's when everything changed. They waved goodbye to their friends and came home bursting with stuff to tell Mum and Dad, only to see their parents seated around the dining table. Now the dining table had meaning in their home. When it was lunch hour and there wasn't food on the table, it meant they needed to discuss something very serious. Eva vividly remembered the last serious discussion they had. It was quite embarrassing. She recalled how her parents stumbled over their words as they tried to explain the changes happening to their bodies, and why it was important for both them and others not to touch or play with their bodies. Her mother had sat them down at the kitchen table, nervously folding a napkin in her hands. "You're both growing up," she had begun, her voice soft but shaky. "Your bodies are changing, and that's completely normal." Her father had nodded in agreement, but he seemed just as uncomfortable, rubbing the back of his neck as he searched for the right words. "You might notice some differences," her mother had continued, glancing at her father for help. "And it's important to remember that your body is your own. No one should touch it without your permission." Eva had shifted in her seat, feeling her cheeks warm as the conversation went on. Ela, of course, had asked a million questions, her curiosity getting the better of her, while Eva had tried to disappear into her chair, hoping the conversation would end soon. Their parents, fumbling through the explanation, had done their best to make it clear their bodies were special and it was important to treat them with respect. Looking back, Eva knew her parents had only been trying to protect them, even if the whole discussion had felt incredibly awkward at the time. But this wasn't going to be another body talk. No, Eva could tell that, at least, with how serious their dad was looking, his hands on his temple, and their mother with worry etched on her forehead, as though she had just finished a lost argument. And although their mother sat there calmly, Eva could tell that whatever they were going to talk about, their mother didn't seem to be in support of it. Instinctively, she knew she would not like it. "Welcome home, sweethearts," she said, gesturing for Eva and Isla to take their seats. "Your dad happens to have something he needs to tell you." They hurriedly took their seats, not knowing what to expect as a result of the growing tension in their hearts. Their father exhaled deeply and turned to them. "Girls, I have good news and bad news." He sighed and poised akimbo. Eva felt her stomach tighten. She had never liked those words. Good news and bad news meant change, unpredictable, unsettling change. Isla fidgeted in her seat, her eyes darting between their parents, eager for the first words to come out. Their father ran a hand through his hair and forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "The good news is, I got a promotion at work." Isla's face lit up immediately. "A promotion? Does that mean more money? More holidays?" Their father chuckled softly, relieved by her enthusiasm. "Yes, something like that. It means I've been recognized for my hard work, and, well, there will be more money coming in, which is always good for the family." Eva, though happy for her father, sensed something beneath his words, an undercurrent of tension that no raise in salary could smooth over. She shifted in her seat, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "But there's the bad news," her father continued, his voice quieter now. He paused, his eyes meeting her mother's before he spoke again. "With the promotion comes a transfer. We have to move to another city." The words hung in the air like a weight, settling heavily on Eva's shoulders. Isla's initial excitement faltered, her smile fading as the realization sank in. "Move?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," their mother added, her tone soft but firm. "We'll need to leave Milford and settle in a new place. It's a great opportunity for your father, but..." She hesitated, clearly searching for the right words. "It's not going to be easy. I know how much you both love it here." Isla's face twisted with confusion. "But what about school? What about our friends? I don't want to leave. I love it here." Eva's heart sank as she watched Isla's growing distress. The thought of leaving Milford, the only home she had ever known, was unsettling enough for her. But for Isla, it seemed unimaginable. Their social lives, their friends, the routines they had built, everything was about to be uprooted. Eva's mind raced as she thought about her books, her quiet refuge beneath the oak tree, and the familiar faces at Milford Academy. What would life be like in this new city? Would she even find the same quiet comfort? Her father's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "I know this is hard," he said gently, "but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the good of the family. It's not going to happen right away. We have time to get everything in order and say our goodbyes." Goodbyes. The word felt like a stone in Eva's chest. She glanced over at Isla, who was now staring down at her hands, her earlier excitement completely extinguished. "But I don't want to say goodbye," Isla mumbled, her voice trembling. "I don't want to leave my friends. What about the science experiments and the games we play at recess? I'll miss everything." Her father reached across the table, placing a hand on Ila's. "I know, sweetie, and I promise we'll make sure you both have everything you need to adjust to the new place. There will be new friends and new adventures. It won't be easy, but we'll get through it together." Ava remained quiet, her thoughts swirling. The idea of starting over, of being in a completely different environment, terrified her. She had always been more reserved, relying on the familiar to keep her grounded. Moving to a new city and meeting new people, it all felt too overwhelming. Her mother, noticing her silence, reached out and touched her shoulder. "Ava, what do you think?" Ava blinked, unsure how to respond. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. All she could think of was what they were about to lose. Their home, their routines, the life they had built in Milford. It was all slipping away. And though she wanted to be strong, to show Isla that everything would be okay, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. And that's when she realized this wasn't just a new chapter, it was the end of one.